Hello and welcome to my research project presentation about Six Sigma in the military. Also going over some highlights of some subjects that I've learned in the class that have meant the most to me. Lean Six Sigma has become one of the most broadly applied and widely used manufacturing philosophies and process improvement methods across the world, being featured in many industries. It started with manufacturing, but it has made its way towards white collar and even other processes that are much more intangible. It is worth noting that Lean Six Sigma is a merger of two other methodologies that both existed prior to Lean Six Sigma. The first obviously being Six Sigma just as a standalone methodology, and then the other one being lean manufacturing. Lean manufacturing originated from Toyota many years ago. It wasn't always called lean manufacturing, but the concepts were there and they gradually developed over the years. And then Six Sigma was its creation was originally created by a book, but it was popularized by GE, and they're the first ones that first did a proof of concept and really prove that this is a methodology that is worth investing time in to really learn and put into practice. So the difference between Six Sigma and lean manufacturing is that Six Sigma is all about quality control and consistency. It wants to put out a product at the highest amount of consistency with the lowest amount of defects possible. Just constantly running through the process, reevaluating every single defect that happens. It gets analyzed, it gets scrutinized, and every single defect, basically an action plan gets put into place about how to mitigate it in the future. Various analytical tools are also used in order to measure performance and identify how significant a defect is and so forth. And this is something that is done over time. It's not meant to be just a one-time process improvement. It's meant to be an ongoing philosophy. It's just proactively used to seek out opportunities for improvement. And that is also true for lean manufacturing, which is also done continuously over time. The goal of lean manufacturing is not about quality, but rather it's about efficiency. Lean manufacturing seeks to identify the value of a product and a process and strip away unnecessary things that don't add to that value. And so neither of these philosophies are better than the other. They're just both different depending on what your goals for the organization is and where you need to find opportunities for improvement. Lean manufacturing seeks to eliminate waste. It also has analytical tools that are run to check for waste, to check for wasted effort. You identify basically in your typical profit-seeking company where these theories are usually applied. The concept of value comes from what is the customer willing to pay more for. So if you have a bike and it has all the bells and whistles in the world, but if the customer is not willing to pay 1 more cent for those streamers or those bells or whistles, then that's considered wasteful. That's the company putting forth their resources, their time, effort, money, etc., into putting those bells and whistles there. That's just taking away from their bottom line. So according to lean manufacturing, then that's going to be something that needs to be eliminated. And lean manufacturing is then combined with Six Sigma to create Lean Six Sigma. And these two are very complementary when used in tandem. So the idea is you run Six Sigma, so you identify areas for quality improvement, and you are improving your processes over time. Then you run lean manufacturing and strip away unnecessary things. and identify where your value is and what things are not contributing to that value. And you just run one after the next after the next. And it works really, really well. And for most situations, them together is better than either one apart. This is because Six Sigma tends to hit a ceiling in its efficiency. This ceiling is where it's trying to recommend solutions that don't add value. For example, if you have a defect in your manufacturing process, some sort of a slight sub-optimized process that results in one defect every 100,000 parts, you could implement a solution, but that solution would involve investing, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars into new equipment just to eliminate such a small inefficiency that leads to such a small defect rate. It just is not cost effective. It doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. And Six Sigma just strives for perfection. And that makes more sense in some industries than others. But most of the time, it does not make that much sense to just endlessly do Six Sigma and just constantly, end up hitting that wall where you go. Six Sigma is suggesting we do all these drastic measures just to get rid of very small inefficiencies. There's a diminishing returns to Six Sigma. So in the very beginning, you'll find huge improvements in your quality based on these recommendations, some of which require very little resources to implement, just tweaking the way things are done, changing the order of things, and so forth. But once you've reached, 98, 99% of your consistency, just getting that extra 0.1, 0.2% is going to be way harder than all those prior ones because your system is so efficient already that to change it will have consequences. So that's where lean manufacturing comes in. That will set a sensible limit to Six Sigma's recommendations and will identify what recommendations are waste and what are not. And so therefore you have a system that naturally achieves an equilibrium between the two of cost efficiency and quality control performance. So that's what Lean Six Sigma is. All right, military logistics as a concept. Logistics is really at the heart of the military success because the military is a sprawling, huge organization. It's one of the most complex and enormous and multifaceted organizations that has ever existed on this earth. The U.S. military spans nearly the entire globe. As they say, the sun never sets on the U.S. military. The U.S. military has many different functions, from those that would be vaguely similar to R&D and research and exploration, and go into combat, land, sea, air combat, cyber security. Just you name it. Hospitals, fire departments. They just have pretty much everything. It's like a society. A military base will have on it just about every function you need to sustain life and be more or less self-contained. So the needs of the military are all enabled by their logistics network. And this is not new. This is going back centuries. You could look at Napoleon, for example, back in the 1700s. Napoleon, his supply chain failed him when he was invading Russia. And part of the reason why his military failed to conquer Russia is because his supply chain was cut off, and his soldiers, even though he had very well trained military, they're not going to be successful if they're starving and they don't have the equipment that they need and so forth. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book, going back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, is that you have to have your supplies, you have to have your rations and your equipment and your clothes and etc. Same thing with the Germans in World War II. Again, kind of a repeat of history. They invaded Russia, supply chain cut off, winter hit, they didn't have winter clothing, ended up ultimately failing to conquer Russia. To give another example that doesn't involve Russia of supply chain failure, that's what ended up happening in Vietnam too. We were occupying Vietnam. We were trying to go into the Viet Cong's territory in the north, and some of their successes against us had to do with their home field advantage, and they were able to disrupt our supply chain and make it hard for us to operate. We were kind of a sitting duck a lot of the times, and even though we way outpowered them, we had muscle on them. In a one-to-one fight, our military, multiple times more powerful. But Vietnam was a failure of a war, basically. I mean, that's a little bit debatable. I don't want to get into all that, but some of the lack of success that we hoped to find can ultimately come down to our inability to secure our supply chain that was trying to operate in enemy territory. So looking at modern day applications of military logistics, we have seen a lot of advances. By the way, logistics in this sense can be broadly defined as the element of time and place being applied to a resource. Now, that resource can be manpower, it can be food, it can be medical supplies, it can be building materials. I mean, literally anything that is used by the military, and time and place. So that's a pretty broad definition. You can see how this ends up being indirectly applied in a lot of different ways. So the military has made use of Six Sigma to augment and improve the efficiency of their logistics network. Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma in particular, even though they were developed by traditional firms in economic settings seeking to maximize profit, they have been able to be applied in other areas, including but not limited to the military. One example of this is that they have been used to improve the efficiency of bureaucratic processes in the U.S. Navy. One of the cases that we describe in great depth in our research paper involves the Navy streamlining their applications to release basically their research, their stories to the public. Had to go through a vetting process to make sure that there's nothing that would compromise the military being released to the public. And that process was hugely inefficient, lots and lots of bureaucratic problems. So this seems like night and day. Like, what does Six Sigma have to do with that? A manufacturing thing. But they were able to make parallels with the Six Sigma philosophies. Sure, there's not a profit, but there is other metrics that are measured. For example, the time that these applications take, the amount of effort every application takes, the success rate, the compliance rate. All these things were factored in and put on a statistically analyzed, and they were able to really demonstrate how their methods were able to be successful in drastically improving those processes. That's just one of many examples. Another one that is probably a little bit more of what you'd expect comes from the Air Force. Depot maintenance and aircraft maintenance means off your home station maintenance. So at the average base that might have aircraft like fighter jets, for example, they're not going to have everything necessary there to repair every single thing that could go wrong with that aircraft. They can take care of day-to-day things, tire changes, oil changes, swapping out parts. But when it comes to overhauling an engine, or when you need to take apart whole systems on the aircraft to get to some deep internal things that need to be tested and calibrated, some of that heavy-duty maintenance has to be done away from home station, or at least it's a lot more efficient and cost-effective to do it away from the home station. So in the maintenance concept for these organizations, they incorporate scheduled trips where either the depot team, Usually the aircraft goes to the depot location offsite and gets in-depth maintenance done. So these depot sites are taking care of aircraft all around the Air Force all the time, coming and going. There's always a hangar full of aircraft that need depot maintenance. And this is just an ongoing thing. Most of it is scheduled maintenance. Most of this is routine things. You know, every 10,000 flying hours or 100,000 flying hours, you need to check the, you know, whatever hydraulic system or engines. So this isn't all like things going wrong. So my point is, this is planned, scheduled maintenance, but it's very intense from a resource standpoint. How can they make it more efficient? Well, by using Lean Six Sigma and another process I'll describe in my next slide, they were able to identify room for improvement and change their processes. They were able to change their manning, change the way that tools and consumables were made available to the technicians and stocked, and improve their output. And so these maintenance concepts can be applied broadly, Lean Six Sigma among other ones, for the U.S. military. One concept I want to briefly cover is the Red Queen theory. This is one that I had heard about prior to this class in a context of biology, but I was very interested to find in one of my case studies that I was reviewing for this project that it was actually able to be applied in an economic sense and even in a military strategy sense. And not only that, but it had been applied to create a manufacturing process improvement method that builds off of Lean Six Sigma. And it was actually used by the Air Force in that depot maintenance case that I mentioned in the prior slide regarding improving the efficiency of depot maintenance that was being done. So to explain what the Red Queen theory is, its name comes from a passage from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass with Alice in Wonderland. In the relevant scene, the Red Queen has Alice ensnared in the Red Queen's race, where Alice is running in place and she's not getting anywhere. So her surroundings are staying the same despite the fact that she's running as fast as she can. And the Red Queen says, here, if you want to go anywhere, you have to run twice as fast as you can. Something to that effect. So what this means is this is an analogy that represents a competitive environment. So through data analysis, we oftentimes, without really thinking about it, end up looking at a stagnant view of your objectives. You go and compare how you want to improve your organization based on its past performance. And so your goals are moving compared, how do we perform last quarter or last year or last whatever? How can we build off of that? Red Queen theory suggests that your goals need to be higher. You need to factor in the improvement that your competition is going to achieve. So therefore, this explains why some organizations can find themselves stagnant, even though they're finding success in improving their processes. You can make yourself better and better over time, but if your rate of improvement is too slow, you're actually falling behind the competition just the same, and your overall performance will not reflect those improvements that you've made. So by incorporating the Red Queen theory concepts with Lean Six Sigma, in that case with the Air Force, what they did was they changed certain variables in the Lean Six Sigma analytics to represent a moving goal. And what this was able to do is provide justification for them to make certain changes that allowed them to basically achieve greater success than they otherwise would have. This sort of hybrid Red Queen, Lean Six Sigma theory is still not widely used and is still somewhat niche. but the case suggests that it should be explored further and perhaps used further by the U.S. military, and that's something I wholeheartedly agree with. And we did cover this in the research project.